There's a hidden force within you, not the polished love and light energy that modern spirituality loves to showcase, but something older, rawer, untamed. It's what ancient mystics called the shadow flame, the vibration that emerges only when you stop pretending to be pure and start being whole. You see, dark entities, whether you believe they are literal beings, psychic parasites, or just the energetic residue of unconsciousness, don't feed on your light. They feed on your fracture. They feed on the parts of you that you reject, the pain you've buried, the truth you're afraid to face. But once you begin to embody your shadow vibration, once you integrate the parts of yourself you used to run from, something incredible happens. The things that used to chase you, haunt you, drain you, start running from you. The first time I felt it, I was deep in the jungles of Southeast Asia, staying in an abandoned temple known only to a few monks. I had gone there to fast, meditate, and confront what I thought were my deepest fears. But what I found was far more real than fear. It was presence. At night I could feel the eyes of something watching me. Not animals. Energy. Old, hungry, ancestral energy. The kind that waits for your attention to slip so it can slip into you. But instead of warding it off with chants or crystals, I did the one thing I had never tried before. I invited it in, not to be possessed, but to witness it without fear. I dropped into my body. I breathed into the tension. I let the unease rise like smoke from my bones. And suddenly, I felt it. My shadow vibration ignited like a pulse. Not chaotic, not aggressive, just undeniable. And in that moment, the presence vanished. Not because I fought it, but because there was nothing left to feed on. This is the first sign your shadow vibration is pushing back every dark entity around you. Your presence becomes energetically uninviting to distortion. Not because you're armored up, but because you're empty of fear. Dark forces don't fear your light. They fear your wholeness. They fear a human being who has met their own darkness and made peace with it. Why? Because that kind of human can't be manipulated, can't be seduced, can't be used. Your frequency becomes so coherent, so ungraspable that nothing can hook into it. Let's go deeper. You start to notice something strange happening in social spaces. People who used to trigger you lose their edge. Environments that used to feel heavy feel neutral or even peaceful. That's the second sign. You start clearing rooms without saying a word. Your shadow vibration becomes a silent disruptor. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It just radiates truth, and truth is the most uncomfortable energy for any entity built on illusion. You may lose friends. You may notice certain people avoiding you. That's not rejection. That's energetic recalibration. Your field is no longer compatible with projection. It forces hidden agendas to rise. And if someone isn't ready to face themselves, your presence will feel like a mirror they're too afraid to look into. The third sign is even more mysterious. You begin to attract spontaneous confessions. Strangers start telling you secrets. People you barely know open up their deepest wounds. Why? Because your shadow vibration doesn't judge. It holds. It sees. And that kind of energy is rare. It's magnetic. It tells the unconscious you're safe to be real here. And while dark entities flee from it, truth seekers are drawn to it like moths to flame. You become a living vortex of emotional gravity. You don't need a title, a robe, or a following. Your energy becomes the temple. Now let me ask you something that goes beyond theory. When pain shows up in your life, intense, irrational, overwhelming, do you try to fix it? Or do you sit with it like a sacred guest? Because here's the fourth sign. Your emotional charge becomes your power source, not your weakness. You stop running from triggers. You use them. Every time anger arises, you channel it. Every time fear emerges, you breathe into it. Every time shame appears, you hold it like a crying child. And in doing so, you reclaim more and more energy from the unconscious. That's what dark entities hate the most. They lose their hiding places. Your emotional honesty becomes a cleansing fire. The fifth sign is subtle but profound. You start to feel a deep, unshakable silence inside you, even in chaos. This isn't numbness. It's not detachment, it's density. You become heavy in the best possible way. Your energy anchors into the earth like roots. You don't react, you resonate. You don't chase peace, you are peace. And dark forces, which thrive on reaction and instability, simply can't find purchase in your field. They try to provoke you, but there's no surface for them to stick to. You become too real. The sixth sign is physical. You may start waking up at strange hours between 2 and 4 a.m., not from anxiety, but from activation. Your body becomes a receiver. Your dreams become more lucid. You start receiving downloads, visions, messages. This isn't random. It's your shadow vibration expanding into spiritual architecture. You're building a new nervous system, one that can house higher truths without collapsing. And in this state, you may notice the final sign. You stop fearing the dark, not just symbolically, literally. You can walk through the night into abandoned buildings, into places others avoid, and feel nothing but presence. Why? Because the darkness outside no longer matches anything unhealed inside. You've integrated it. You've become it. Not in a destructive way, but in the way only true spiritual masters understand. You become invisible to the things that used to haunt you. The truth is, you don't need to fight darkness. You don't need to banish, bind, or burn anything. You need only to be whole. Because your shadow vibration is the one frequency distortion cannot survive in. It's not about being spiritually perfect. It's about being energetically undeniable. In the next part, I'll dive into the mechanics of how shadow vibration actually rewires your energetic field, how it transforms your aura into something that repels distortion without resistance, and how to strengthen it through real-world rituals and alignment. We'll also explore what happens when you meet another person carrying this same vibration and why those meetings can feel like spiritual supernovas.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
There's a moment in your evolution when you realize the most powerful protection isn't something you wear, chant, or visualize. It's something you become. Something that radiates from your very being, silently, undeniably. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it tells every spiritual parasite, every manipulative frequency, every unseen manipulator, no entry, no access, no permission. That's what your shadow vibration begins to do as it matures. It turns your aura into a kind of spiritual firewall, one that doesn't just block darkness, it transforms it. You see, most people externalize their spiritual safety. They cling to rituals, crystals, prayers, and sacred symbols because they haven't yet realized that the real sacred symbol is their own coherence. But when your shadow vibration is fully integrated, your aura becomes a field of uncompromising truth. And truth, in its rawest form, is incompatible with entities that survive on fear, fragmentation, and falsehood. They don't just avoid you, they can't even see you properly. To them, your frequency is like staring into the sun. It scrambles their signal. It collapses their form. But let's understand how this happens, step by step. Your aura is not some mystical cloud floating around you. It's an extension of your nervous system, your emotional body, your psychic blueprint. Most people's auras are filled with leaks, places where their unresolved pain, self-doubt, or suppressed emotion creates openings. Entities don't possess people randomly. They find these leaks, these fractures, and they insert themselves where the person has abandoned their own presence. But when you begin the work of shadow integration, when you face the parts of yourself that you were taught to fear, you start mending the cracks. One by one, not by force, but by being with what is. And it's not just passive healing. It's active claiming. You start reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. You stop giving away your energy in exchange for approval, safety, or identity. You stop outsourcing your intuition. And in doing so, your aura becomes dense with presence, not heavy in a burdensome way, but heavy in the way stone temples are, Aussie, rooted, immovable. You become a place of spiritual gravity. And here's the paradox. The stronger your shadow vibration becomes, the less effort you need to exert to stay protected. You don't have to chant "I am safe" 1,000 times. You just are. You radiate the frequency of someone who doesn't negotiate with distortion. S5, let me ask you something that few people dare to consider. Where in your life are you still subconsciously asking for permission to exist? Because that's where the cracks live. And the moment you revoke that request, when you stop waiting for approval from others, from systems, from spirits, you seal the leak. This is the real magic. Not casting spells to ward off demons, but closing the invitations you didn't know you were sending. Your aura begins to speak a new language, not of fear, not of defense, but of non-negotiable presence. And it's not just dark entities that respond to this. Humans do too. You'll notice people shifting around you. The ones who operate from unconscious manipulation will either try to test your field or they'll vanish. You'll notice fewer psychic attacks, fewer emotional entanglements, less drama. Not because you've escaped the world, but because your vibration is no longer a match for distortion. Even your dreams change. You stop having nightmares. You stop being chased. You start becoming the observer, the architect, the guide. You don't fear the underworld anymore because you've walked through it and come out crowned. Let me ask you something that few people dare to consider. Where in your life are you still subconsciously asking for permission to exist? Because that's where the cracks live. And the moment you revoke that request, when you stop waiting for approval from others, from systems, from spirits, you seal the leak. This is the real magic. Not casting spells to ward off demons, but closing the invitations you didn't know you were sending. Your aura begins to speak a new language. Not of fear, not of defense, but of non-negotiable presence. And it's not just dark entities that respond to this. Humans do too. You'll notice people shifting around you. The ones who operate from unconscious manipulation will either try to test your field or they'll vanish. You'll notice fewer psychic attacks, fewer emotional entanglements, less drama. Not because you've escaped the world, but because your vibration is no longer a match for distortion. Even your dreams change. You stop having nightmares. You stop being chased. You start becoming the observer, the architect, the guide. You don't fear the underworld anymore because you've walked through it and come out crowned. And here's the most beautiful part: this kind of aura doesn't shut people out. It doesn't isolate you. It invites truth in. The right people, the ones who are doing the work, who are ready to meet themselves, will be magnetized to you. Not because you're high vibe, but because you're real. You become a sanctuary, not a fortress, a mirror, not a mask. And the people who enter your field will either rise with you or leave. But either way, you stay whole. So how do you strengthen this aura in practical terms? Daily stillness. Not to escape your thoughts, but to witness them. Emotional honesty. Not for performance, but for integration. Boundaries, not to keep people out, but to keep your field clean. And sacred action. Every time you speak your truth, even if your voice shakes, even if no one claps for it, you fortify your field. Every time you choose alignment over approval, you deepen your density. Every time you sit with your shadow instead of outsourcing your power, your aura thickens with truth. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into what happens when two beings carrying this shadow vibration meet, how their fields interact, why certain connections feel like cosmic detonations, and how to recognize if you're being called into sacred alliance or karmic entanglement. We'll also explore the spiritual laws of energetic sovereignty and what it really means to walk as a fully integrated force in a world built on fragmentation. There's an undeniable intensity that arises when two human beings who've integrated their shadow vibration encounter each other. It's not romantic by default. It's not always pleasant, but it is always potent. Something ancient stirs, something the world has forgotten. Recognition without masks. You see, most relationships are built on projection. We fall in love with who we think someone is, or we're drawn to what they reflect back to us: comfort, validation, distraction. But when two titans meet, two people who have walked through their inner fires, faced their darkness, and emerged whole, there is no performance. There is only truth. And truth doesn't flirt, it activates. The energy between two integrated beings doesn't just connect, it collides. Not in chaos, but in clarity. There's often an immediate sense of familiarity, like you're not meeting for the first time, but remembering each other. That's because shadow vibration clears the noise. It strips away the spiritual ego, the persona, the need to impress. What's left is essence, and essence recognizes itself. These meetings, whether they last a moment or a lifetime, are not accidents. They are summonings. Your frequency called theirs, or theirs called yours. And when the fields touch, something unlocks. But here's the paradox. The stronger your shadow vibration, the more discerning you become, not just about who you allow close, but about why they're being drawn to you. And this is where it gets deep. Not everyone who feels intense around you is meant to stay. Some are meant to trigger you. Some are meant to test you. Some are echoes of old karmic loops showing up one last time to see if you'll take the bait. The difference now? You can feel the current. You don't need to ask someone's intentions, you read their field. You feel the coherence or the distortion. You feel whether their presence expands you or drains you. And that knowing is sacred. Shadow vibration gives you an inner compass that no one can override. You no longer fall for charm. You no longer confuse chemistry with destiny. You don't mistake intensity for alignment. You've walked through your own illusions, so you see through them in others. And this doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. You can love deeply, even fiercely, but without attachment. Because you're not looking for someone to complete your story. You're looking for someone to walk beside you in truth. Now let me ask you something that might crack open an old wound. Have you ever stayed in a connection because you were addicted to the intensity, not the integrity? Because when you carry shadow vibration, you no longer need the drama. You don't need the highs and lows to feel alive. You've found your aliveness in stillness, in presence, in embodiment. And from that place, relationships become sacred mirrors, not emotional roller coasters. But let's go even deeper. When two shadow-integrated beings come together in true alignment, something mystical happens. Their fields don't just amplify each other, they merge into a third field. A shared vortex, a kind of energetic temple that holds space for evolution, creativity, even planetary work. These are the partnerships that change timelines, that birth movements, that ripple through the collective unconscious and leave a mark. And they're not always romantic. Sometimes it's teacher and student, sometimes it's allies. Sometimes it's a soul contract that lasts a few days but leaves you forever changed. This is why your discernment matters. Because the more powerful your field becomes, the more likely it is to attract both light and distortion disguised as light. You'll meet people who feel like a match, but if you listen closely, they're still leaking energy, still wearing masks, still selling you a version of themselves they haven't yet embodied. And your job isn't to fix them. It's not to teach them. It's to stay in your frequency, to let your field do the work. Your presence alone becomes the catalyst. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to be. And when you do find another being operating from that same depth, that same density of presence, the connection feels like silence. Not emptiness, but vastness, spaciousness. There's no rush, no anxiety, no clinging, just deep listening, deep seeing, and deep respect. That's the real intimacy. When you can sit in silence with someone and feel like the entire universe is present in that quiet. No games, no rollers, just truth meeting truth. This kind of sacred relationship can't be manufactured. It can't be forced. It can only be received when you've become the kind of person who no longer needs it. That's the final irony. The less you seek, the more aligned people arrive. Not because you're manifesting them, but because your frequency is now a match for coherence. And coherence attracts coherence. In the final part, we'll bring everything together. I'll show you how to live as a walking gateway, how to embody your shadow vibration, not just in your relationships or meditations, but in every step, every choice, every moment. We'll explore how to maintain this field in a chaotic world, how to become a vessel for higher guidance without losing your human truth, and how to walk as a living force of nature, unapologetic, unshakable, and unforgettable. There's a point in your spiritual evolution where you stop seeking experiences and start becoming the experience itself. You're no longer trying to touch something divine, you are the divine, embodied, but not the sanitized, polished version. Not the version that pretends to be above pain, above conflict, above darkness. You are the divine with teeth, with weight, with scars. You are the living gateway where heaven and hell meet and find peace in the center. And this is not a metaphor. When you carry shadow vibration fully, you become a walking initiation for the world around you. The chaos doesn't stop. The noise of the world doesn't disappear. In fact, it gets louder, but it no longer moves you. Not because you're numb, but because you're anchored. You've built your roots in the unseen, in the fire that once burned you. You don't react to every storm because you are the storm now, but with direction, with stillness at the core. When people around you spiral, you don't try to fix them. You become a stable field. Your presence alone acts like a tuning fork. Either they come into resonance or they fall away. You don't chase. You don't prove. You simply hold. And this kind of holding is sacred. It's the rarest energy in the world. Everything around us is built to distract, to fracture, to divide. But you become the opposite. You unify, you embody, you remember. And that remembrance turns you into something unshakable. Not invincible because you still feel everything, but unshakable because you don't resist anything. You've made peace with your own pain, with your own rage, with your own shadows. So when the world throws its chaos at you, there's nothing inside you left to hook into. You don't absorb the darkness, you transmute it on contact. But how do you live this practically? It's not about meditating for hours or escaping to the mountains. It's about how you show up in ordinary moments. When someone disrespects you, do you collapse or do you speak from grounded truth? When fear arises, do you suppress it or do you breathe into it and ask it what it needs? When you're misunderstood, do you defend your identity or do you let silence speak louder than explanation? These are the moments where your aura is forged. Spiritual power isn't built in grand ceremonies. It's built in the fire of the mundane. Let me ask you something that might change how you see your entire life. What if every difficult situation in your life wasn't a blockage, but a training ground? What if the chaos around you isn't trying to break you, but to reveal you? Every trigger, every disappointment, what if it all has been preparing your nervous system to carry more truth, more frequency, more you? When you live like this, you stop waiting for the world to become peaceful before you relax. You create peace in your field and the world begins to respond. You become a node in the human grid that broadcasts coherence. And the more of us who walk like this, grounded, integrated, real, the more the collective begins to shift, not through force, not through preaching, but through presence, through example, through the undeniable weight of someone who has nothing left to hide. And here's the final, most sacred truth. You don't need to reach enlightenment. You don't need to ascend. You need to descend fully into yourself, into your body, into your truth, into the messy, sacred, terrifying beauty of being fully human. That is where the divine lives. Not in escape, but in embodiment. Not in perfection, but in authenticity. When you walk this path, you stop trying to become spiritual, you start becoming real. And in a world built on illusion, realness is the revolution. You are the gateway. You are the temple. You are the fire, the silence, the storm, and the stillness. And now you walk not to prove anything but because your very presence is medicine. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be followed. You just need to be so fully yourself that nothing that is not truth can stick to you. That is the path of the shadow. That is the return of the real. And you're already walking it.